Én Lőrinc Barbő vagyok, ez pedig a Bitcoin Kebab, a Bitcoin podcastja. Welcome back to the Bitcoin Kebab podcast. Today I'm joined by Brandon Green, the Chief of Staff and Director of Events at BTC Inc., the organization behind Bitcoin Magazine and the iconic Bitcoin conference series. Brandon's journey into the Bitcoin world is truly captivating. Starting as a curious college student inspired by a talk on decentralization, he quickly found himself interning at BTC Inc., where he has since grown into a key role running major Bitcoin events globally. In our conversation, Brandon shared his early experiences at BTC Inc. and how he helped shape the Bitcoin conference into the massive event it is today. We discussed the challenges of organizing such large-scale events and the process of securing high-profile speakers like Donald Trump and the impact these conferences have on the Bitcoin community. Brandon also offered insights into the future of Bitcoin, the concept of hyper-Bitcoinization, and the role of events like Bitcoin Conference playing in the adoption. Whether you are a seasoned Bitcoiner or new to the space, this episode is packed with valuable insights from someone deeply embedded in the industry. Tune in for a fascinating conversation about Bitcoin, events, and what it takes to push the boundaries in this ever-evolving space. So hi, Brandon. Thanks for joining me today.
Hello. Great to be here. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, so actually, let's just jump into it already. What was your orange pill? How did you meet Bitcoin and crypto?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was in a senior year of college, and a guy named David Bailey came to the University of Alabama to give a talk on truth in the media. And he was in this fireside with a guy from the New York Times. And I showed up being like, let's listen to this New York Times reporter, take this upstart media guy to town. And David, who's the CEO of BTC Inc. and Bitcoin Magazine and the conference, David completely wiped the floor with this New York Times reporter. And some of the things he said, I had just never really heard articulated before. So he was talking about, the fact that the internet decentralizes truth apparatus, decision-making apparatus, information to the people. And that these old central guardians of what we're allowed to know and who we're allowed to talk to and how information flows are all going to be disrupted and they're all going to be obsoleted. And it was demonstrably true. This was just on the backs of Trump winning the election, just a couple months after he took office. And this other guy was kind of trying to make the case that somehow this was all just an aberration, but that the trend was going in the opposite direction. And it's just like, it wasn't. And so he tied off kind of the whole fireside with this, it's not just the internet doing this to information. Bitcoin is doing this to money, and it's just getting started. And if you want to know more, come talk to me after the fireside. And so I lined up backstage right afterwards. I was like, I got to talk to this guy. And so we started talking about Bitcoin. And at that point, we were still trying to figure out what blockchain meant and all these other things. And of course, we learned the lessons the hard way on just how important Bitcoin is and how unimportant the rest of kind of the crypto space is. But we had to learn it. It wasn't obvious at the time. So yeah, that was kind of my moment, really getting into the space and getting excited about it. I was graduating. This was the spring. I was graduating in the summer, and I had a free summer before I started my next job. And so I was like, I'm from Nashville, which is where our headquarters are. I got a free summer. This seems really interesting. Can I just come learn from you and move some boxes around or something? And he was like, yeah, sure, come on. And the rest is history.
Wow. But you had other jobs before you joined BTC Inc., right? So I read that you were teaching a course at the university as well.
Yeah, that was while I was still a senior in college at that point, but I got to teach a freshman seminar on, the history of information and ideas, which is pretty fun.
Oh, okay. So did you incorporate this newly learned knowledge into the course as well, after you saw the fireside chat?
It was a fall semester course, and this happened in the spring, so it was actually afterwards. But funny enough, we did have a history lesson on money, and we tied it off talking about Bitcoin. But at the time, I didn't really know what Bitcoin was. I just knew it was here's some new little money invention over here that, could be cool. I don't know. And it's funny, I taught it with a partner, and he was the one who really took the lead on talking about Bitcoin because I truly just didn't know anything about it. And then, obviously the roles reversed, and I ended up working in the industry. So funny how that worked.
But it's great that straight out of college, you already like joined BTC Inc, and then you were like learning on the go and then growing with the company. What was your journey like through? You joined as an intern, I guess.
Joined as an intern, yeah, exactly.
And now we
I
are
joined as
here.
an intern. Exactly. And I also run sort of the events division of the company. So the Bitcoin conference that just happened in Nashville, as well as the one that's happening in Amsterdam in a couple of months. Those are my babies. So yeah, no, it's funny. I didn't have any background in finance or economics or anything like that. I was a chemical engineering background. That's what I studied in university, very math and science focused. But I just wanted to be useful, like I just wanted to help the company wherever we needed it. At the time, we were kind of a small magazine. We had a website. Our strength was in the fact that David had been in Bitcoin earnestly, like truly full time in Bitcoin since 2013. And so he had all of these relationships, all of the OG, the names that you think of when you think of like, oh, these guys were the original Bitcoiners. Yeah. They were like his best friends. And so it opened up all these doors for us to be able to, tell stories that no one else could tell, get writers and announcements and all sorts of stuff. Hello to my cat that no one else could get. And so, we were able to kind of leverage that throughout the years into, business ventures, a hedge fund, and of course, like starting a conference series. And the Bitcoin conference started in 2019. And at that point, I really was just helping on like media partnerships and ticket sales and, some basic items, a little bit of marketing. We just kept at it year over year. We went through COVID. We went through Bitcoin 2021 in Miami, where I ran the programming at that point, and then worked my way up from there. And now I run the whole thing. So it's been a fun journey.
What was the size of the company when you started the conference series? So was it like 4 or 5 people that were like generally working on everything, or was it like a bigger team that you were working with?
So when I started interning, there were about 10 of us. That was like the summer of 2017, spring, summer. And then I would say by the time we launched the Bitcoin conference, there were probably about 25 of us, I would say. Most people working on the Bitcoin magazine side of things, just more media, general editors, writers, those kinds of things. The conference team, though, the core team, it was myself. David obviously was directly working on it. A guy named Harrison, Justin, and then JC. It was basically like 5 of us, and Tommy, who was doing design. So 6 of us kind of that kickstarted that little initiative. And yeah, now we got a team of over 40 people full time working on the conference side. It's fun.
Wow. Yeah. That must be really fun. And actually, like, yeah, the names that you are like managed to get to your conferences, I almost had the chance to attend this year, but next year is I believe is my year. Like 2025, I'm coming to Nashville. So.
Amazing. We'll be in Vegas next year. So
oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm not coming.
No, you got to enjoy Vegas. It'll be crazy. It'll be fun.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure. Let's see what's going to happen. As a European, I have my ideas about Vegas, and then I don't want to get a face tattoo and get married in a weekend during like the conference.
Face tattoos are so much fun. What are you talking about? No, Vegas can be crazy, but it'll also be a really great place to do the event. It's actually like the conference capital of the world in some ways. There's like most of the biggest events in the world happen in Vegas. The most obvious one being CES, which is the largest technology and computers and internet conference in the world. They have like probably 100 to 150,000 people that roll through that event in a year and any given year. And yeah, it's massive. And Vegas is like the only city that can support that level of attendance, like trying to get 100,000 people into a city that don't usually stay there. It's not an easy task. So Nashville would not be able to handle that.
Yeah. And actually like this year obviously the lineup was crazy, and I'm not even sure like how did you manage to get Trump to go there? Like how did it happen? Or was he the one like, hey guys, I have ideas about crypto, can I go and talk to you? Or like
yeah, it was a very long process. The reality is we started talking to him back in about February, maybe early March. And really, we were just trying to point out the opportunity to him. Like, that's how it all started, was he wanted to understand, why should I, while I'm busy running for president, care about Bitcoin, right? And so, we pointed out the fact that his opponent, Biden, his administration had been incredibly hostile to the industry. Lots of companies were leaving the US. Many more companies lost their bank accounts, lost access to their bank accounts. The regulation was so arbitrary and kind of clouded that many companies had no clue whether they were operating in a compliant way until the SEC sued them randomly. And so there were just all of these dynamics that were happening that really made it difficult for companies to have faith and confidence that they can operate in the US moving forward, especially if Biden were to get reelected. And so, on the flip side, the latest, study that was done about, crypto ownership in the United States was done by Coinbase and Kraken in 2013. And they found that there were over 50 million people in the United States that owned Bitcoin or other crypto. And that's 50 million people that would not want to see Bitcoin become outlawed or the industry get shipped overseas. That's a massive, you get all 50 million of those and you just sail your way into the White House. And so many of those people are going to be single issue voters. Many of those people have a large amount of their net worth in Bitcoin. They care about seeing Bitcoin treated fairly by a United States regulatory apparatus. And they're upset and frustrated with Biden. And, the reality is we still, even with Harris, we still haven't seen any sort of reverse of course in terms of how they're treating it. So that was the foundation of the conversation, was like, look, there's a massive opportunity for you to get a large voter base. And so then that opened the door. Then David got to meet with him a couple of times and really talk to him about what is Bitcoin? Why is Bitcoin important? Why do these people care so much about it? He went from, yeah, I've heard of Bitcoin. Yeah, I kind of know what it is, to like, oh, this is important. This is potentially the future of all the world's commerce, all the world's, every single person using Bitcoin. And I can't be known as the president that allowed this innovation to leave the United States. So he very quickly got on board. He talked to a lot of the miners. He was learning about, how Bitcoin mining really helps the infrastructure, the energy infrastructure of the United States. Even now, there's kind of a strong narrative being built around like the fact that all these mining companies created this infrastructure for server farms, that now it's allowing the United States to be a leader in AI infrastructure, because it's the same needs, cooling, rack space, access to like high amounts of electricity that AI is needing in order to be able to like really build out in the United States. And so, without Bitcoin mining, there wouldn't have been that incentive to create all this infrastructure in the first place. So there's like many things that the Bitcoin industry has done to really help secure the United States from a national security perspective. And so he really understood that, and it clicked with him very quickly. He's a smart dude. I mean, he really is. Like, he understands what kind of the opportunity is. And so from there, the conversation was like, okay, well, we happen to run the biggest event in the entire world for Bitcoin. It's happening in Nashville. You got to come speak. And he was like, I'm in. So that was kind of the trajectory of it. And obviously there was tons of back and forth and tons of details that I left out. But yeah, it was our biggest attempt at ever getting a speaker, and I'd say we nailed it. So it was pretty fun.
Yeah, you definitely did. And I don't know if like you take requests or anything, but like I would definitely want to see some kind of debate on crypto and Bitcoin between Harris and Trump. If that could be like, can I put that on my wish list?
No, I'd love to see it too. I mean, it was interesting. There was a moment where it looked like we may actually get Harris to come speak as well. I was talking with her team the week of our event, because if you remember, the timing of it was kind of funny. It was the Saturday, I think, before our conference that Biden stepped down and endorsed Kamala to take over. And so, that was less than a week before our event. It was a Saturday before it. Our event started on a Thursday. And so immediately, we had a few of the people in our network that connected us to what ended up becoming like kind of the campaign team for Harris. And we were talking, we were like, hey, we're the biggest event in the world for Bitcoin, but really for finance, for technology, like, we'll claim it all, right? Like this is a pivotal moment on the campaign trail. We have both Trump and RFK, the other two presidential candidates, speaking at our event. They view this audience as an important one. The Biden administration's been very hostile. You have an opportunity to change course. Come speak to our audience. And we got pretty far into the conversation before, I think it was mostly a logistical thing, but it was also, I sensed that they weren't entirely on board with maybe changing course. And so I think that played into it as well in terms of why she ultimately didn't come. But yeah, I mean, a debate between them would be amazing. It'd be the first ever debate on monetary policy between two presidential candidates. It would be fantastic. We really want to make that happen. I just don't think it is going to happen. I don't get the sense that she's making too many unscripted public appearances. So, we'll push for it, but I can't promise we're going to be able to make it happen.
Okay, I'm still like, I'm rooting for that though. So in terms of monetary policy, like, let's just circle back to the beginning. So when you started to learn about like Bitcoin and crypto, were you mesmerized by the financial part of it or more of the decentralization? Because I remember like I met Bitcoin in high school, and yeah, we can say that I came for the tech, but I came for the money and I stayed for the tech. So how was it for you?
It's a good question. I would say that it was a mix of both. And, because I got in the early 2017, it wasn't like we weren't in this mania phase yet. We weren't in this, like the price wasn't exploding. And it gave me a little bit of a chance to really learn about what was going on before, everything started going crazy and everything started pumping and all this. And so, I'd like to think that I got a little bit more of the technical side first. That being said, I've always said that Bitcoin's greatest marketing arm is its price. And, you can just look at how adoption cycles work. Most people buy their first Bitcoin in the blow off top phase of one of the bubbles of the Bitcoin price. And so, you can't really separate that fact. Like people see the opportunity for, this asset to go up in value and they buy it. And then they learn about it, and then they understand like, okay, what did I just buy? Especially like as the price is going down, they're like, why did I just do this? What did I just buy? Right. And some people are like, screw this, I'm out, and they sell. And some people are like, holy cow, this was a bubble, but this underlying idea is sound and it's going to come back. And then, those are the people who kind of stay in for the next cycle and help build the future of the whole industry. So yeah, that'd be my, I guess, indirect answer, but my answer to that question.
So, okay, let's just touch on the topic of hyper Bitcoinization. Like, how do you envision that to happen? Is it gonna happen in the next? I'm not even sure if are we in the bull run now? Are we in like? I'm completely like losing track, to be honest. Like,
I would say this cycle has been a little weird because the ETFs, got released so early in the cycle. Before the halving, even we had Bitcoin ETFs, which was something that we'd worked on for 10 years. And we had to sue the SEC in order to make it happen, let the records show. So it's not like, they just granted ETFs, like we had to go to the courts. But that I think pulled forward a little bit of the upswing. And so, like we're in this weird in-between phase right now where it feels like the bull market's already started, but we're only, 4 months post halving. And so, there hasn't really been the full cyclical start to the bull market as we would normally kind of define it. And so, yeah, I think this one, the curve's going to look a little different, but the fundamental structure of the market cycle, you have the halving, you have the reduction in new supply, you have the reduction in net selling, you have the speculation kind of built on top of that. That starts increasing the price starts going up, more people are paying attention, they start buying, that all remains unbroken. It's just going to have a little bit of a warbly start because these ETFs came in. But ultimately, I think those ETFs are going to be a fundamental reason why the bubble this time, the blow off top, is going to go much higher than anyone expects, because there's so much ability for people to rotate assets into Bitcoin, and there's so little friction now. Before you had to go set up a Coinbase account, connect your bank account, wait 7 days for the test transactions to come through, and then you can buy, right? Now people can just open up their brokerage account, dump their 401k in, and it's just going to send the price that further high in the blow off top, which is a good and a bad thing. I think that like the blow off top will still be a blow off top. People will lose money if they're buying up that high, but in the long run, it'll all smooth out. So that's the market structure as I see it today. But I forget what your question was.
Yeah. So let me just like reflect this one then. So do you think that the ETFs are like one step towards to hyper Bitcoinization? And like what?
I
how
think
does
ETFs were an inevitable misstep on the path toward hyper Bitcoinization. I think that, if you look at what an ETF is, it's a derivative of Bitcoin. It's a, centralized, tokenized ownership of Bitcoin. And the reality is we already have a much better form of ascertaining ownership of Bitcoin. It's called the Bitcoin blockchain. So you don't really need an ETF in order to own Bitcoin. It's just a grandma-friendly way of allowing people to own Bitcoin. But it comes with the risk that you're trusting a third-party custodian with your keys. And, every single person I've ever met who has done that, if time goes on long enough, regrets doing that. It ends up getting hacked. They end up having some sort of compliance burden that comes on them in order to actually remove their Bitcoin. Or in the case of these ETFs, they may never be able to get their Bitcoin out, And so I think that my bet is that these ETFs are either going to get hacked or they're going to rug, and they're going to end up becoming part of nation states' treasury holdings of Bitcoin. And everyone's going to get some determined dollar amount for their ETF shares, and then thanks, bye-bye, like you don't own this Bitcoin anymore. I think that that's going to happen. But I also think that it was inevitable that ETFs were going to be approved, that those ETFs were going to become nation state Bitcoin treasuries, and that the people were going to get rugged on them in order for Bitcoin to continue on its path of hyper Bitcoinization. Like there was never a world in which everyone was going to be using Bitcoin that you didn't have this nation state seizure of people's Bitcoin. And so for that reason, like it's both a good and a bad thing. Like it is part of the path, but it's one of the probably darker parts when all said and done.
Mm-hmm. So how does the actual vision look like? That everyone is using Bitcoin and then we are like buying our coffee with Bitcoin, or is that like a stable coin that we are using for, I don't know, buying the groceries, or and Bitcoin is acting as some kind of reserve currency, or like what's the vision of it?
I think that that's to be determined. I would hope that the answer, and I think if given enough time, the answer is ultimately everyone is using Bitcoin in their daily lives, and there is no stablecoin kind of derivative that's backstopped by Bitcoin. But I think it just, it's a process. And I think the reality is that it will be possible to back stablecoins with Bitcoin. Therefore, it will be done. And those stable coins are going to last longer than, non-Bitcoin backed stable coins. And so those will be the final vestiges of kind of a pseudo fiat system before we ultimately get Bitcoin. But we may not get past that phase in your and my lifetime. By the time that we're all dead, like it may still be stable coins that most people are using. And those stable coins are backed by Bitcoin. I don't know. I truly don't. I think that that's going to be the hardest part, though, to kind of phase out and to get people to truly move away from a dollar to just using Bitcoin. Like that'll be the last step.
What is holding this mass adoption back? Like now we have the ETFs, and still like in the next cycle or like the next bull run, I'm not sure if we're gonna reach that adoption phase where everyone is like, okay, I see the value in Bitcoin and I'm able to use it. So So what do you think is like holding the adoption back at this point?
I'd say there's a couple of things. Number one is that there's certain, like most wealth is held by technologically illiterate people today. The older the generation, the more wealth they generally hold. And the less likely they are to have ever tried to do an on-chain Bitcoin transaction, much less understand Lightning, much less understand self-custody. And so, there's an element of this where it's just you have to go generation by generation and see the adoption curve kind of take place that way. And so, as the older generations pass away and leave their wealth and the wealth kind of goes to the next generation, that will beget more adoption. And certainly like our kids are going to be native Bitcoin crypto users. Hopefully Bitcoin users. I mean, my kids will be Bitcoin users, but plenty of kids will probably also be dabbling in crypto and other things. But yeah, like that, like they're going to be native to it. They're going to think that in the same way that we think like checks are foreign and old school, they're going to say the same thing about like credit cards and bank wires and all these things. It's like, Dad, why are you using bank wire? Like, just use Bitcoin. So that's definitely a phase of it. And then I would also say that there are just areas of the world that continue to be underdeveloped. And in some ways, Bitcoin is a solution there because you just need an internet connection to send it. But in other ways, there's still this kind of spottiness of internet connection. There's still questionable electrical grids and all of these things that'll hold it back. And so, Bitcoin adoption will always kind of be a corollary and correlated to infrastructure build out of the world and kind of a flourishing of human society. And that takes time too. So those would be my two biggest, I would say, barriers to adoption today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But like a country being underdeveloped or not like being up to par to the European or the US or like the developed nations systems is sometimes can be it can be an advantage. For example, El Salvador, now that they are like Nayib Bukele basically like turned the country around, and then now like that's like the safest country ever, like and then they are using Bitcoin in their everyday like transactions, and then they have their own like Bitcoin wallets as well. So and also some parts of Africa they skipped crypto because they had like a solution before that, but I can see like a mass adoption starting from Africa now because they had mobile money. And on mobile money, usually there's like a 20 or 20 to 40% tax that the mobile companies are charging them. So like in terms of sending crypto, obviously like if the network is very congested, then it can be like a high price to pay for coffee or your groceries. But other than that, maybe sometimes it's still like cheaper than using your mobile money.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely think that in some ways, the African nations, El Salvador, they're going to be in the cutting edge of the adoption. I will say, though, you have to square that with the unfortunate truth, which is that they're also on the lower end of wealth holdings, right? Like if you look at where wealth is concentrated in the world, it's not concentrated in those countries. And so, there's, I guess, two ways of measuring adoption. Number one is, how many people, what percentage of people in the world are using Bitcoin in daily lives? And then the other one would be like, what percentage of global wealth is being denominated in Bitcoin? And so, maybe both of those things don't happen in the same way at the same time. And yeah, I mean, Bukele has done a tremendous job in El Salvador. I think that you still see like there's still a reticence to using Bitcoin by native Salvadorans. And, that's something that I think, again, like there has to be a level of comfortability with it. There has to be a level of accepting the turbulence of Bitcoin, the volatility of Bitcoin. And, there's also Tether. Tether is being widely rolled out in El Salvador, and many people prefer to use a dollar-denominated stablecoin rather than Bitcoin right now. And so, back to the earlier conversation about like, where do stablecoins fit into all of this? Maybe most people will start using Tether before they start getting comfortable with Bitcoin. And that's just one of the paths along the adoption cycle. But ultimately, ultimately Bitcoin and Tether is Bitcoin versus US dollar. And the monetary policies of those will do battle, and you can't beat Bitcoin's monetary policy. So if you give it enough time, Bitcoin will overtake Tether in adoption.
Hopefully. Yeah, I'm rooting for it. Yeah, I'm not sure if we are like realist here, but yeah, let's see what's gonna happen. So if we want to have like Bitcoin takeover, in a sense, then you and me should start using Bitcoin in our everyday life as well. Like, do you use Bitcoin in your daily transactions? Can you go and buy your coffee with like your Lightning wallet, or like, how does it look like in your general life? Or you are not like really using it for smaller transactions?
What I would say is that the way that I anticipate this kind of going is less so of me trying to convince every coffee shop I go to accept Bitcoin when they don't. It's more going to be a facet of those coffee shop owners eventually become Bitcoiners because of the savings technology of it, because of the store of value. Mm-hmm. And they're going to want Bitcoin. And they're going to go first from accepting fiat and converting it into Bitcoin on the back end as part of their savings to eventually accepting Bitcoin. At which point, it'll be much easier for us to use it in our daily lives. But as of right now, I think most people use Bitcoin as a savings technology, which is okay. I don't think that there's a wrong way to use Bitcoin. And I think that, sometimes everyone gets so impatient with the path of hyper Bitcoinization that they don't stop and smell the roses and appreciate, just how far we've already come. Right. And so I anticipate, I've always had this kind of riff that people talk about like the 3, sometimes 4, properties of money, right? Mm-hmm. It's a store of value, it's a medium of exchange, it's a unit of account. But I view those as the 3 adoption phases of Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. First, it has to be widely adopted as a store of value. And only once it is a store of value across the board can it then be used as a medium of exchange. And then only once it's truly used as a medium of exchange, across the board, does it become the unit of account that people then, base their transactions in. And so, we're still in that adoption curve of store of value. The beauty of the adoption curve of store of value is that that's where the greatest price appreciation should exist, right? It's everyone kind of moving their wealth over to Bitcoin, while they're still transacting in dollars and they're still denominating those transactions in dollars. So that's where we are right now. And that's fine, but it will change, and it will change quickly when it does.
So I read somewhere that like half of the people that are attending your conferences are normies, or like normies in the sense that they are like meeting Bitcoin for the first time. Are you targeting them specifically? Do you have like some kind of educational platform for them to like get to know Bitcoin and learn more about it at the conference?
Certainly. Yeah. Well, so Bitcoin Magazine is our biggest way that we try and educate normies on Bitcoin. I would say that the composition of our audience changes based on where we are in the cycle. And so, in 2023, for instance, last year, there were not that many normies. There were not that many people who were unfamiliar with Bitcoin. We kind of break down the audience as curious, casual, and convicted, right? Mm-hmm. And so if we call like that curious audience, really the normie audience, maybe it bleeds into casual a little bit now. Those people weren't there last year. The people who came last year were truly there because they believed in Bitcoin through the bear market. We were at like, 20K Bitcoin prices, right? Like they believed that we were coming back, and that's why they wanted to come to the Bitcoin conference. They're building the industry. This year, we certainly saw a huge uptick in the curious and casual audience. And that's because, we can get these mainstream draws like a Donald Trump to really, why is Donald Trump speaking at a Bitcoin conference? That's the greatest question someone can ask. Come find out, right? And so, did we have a ton of 101 content? First of all, 100%, but it was baked into a lot of the content that you saw throughout. We try not to make our content on most of our stages too inaccessible to a casual audience. Some of it is for sure, especially on like the open source stage and the mining stage. It's truly for more sophisticated people. But, our main stage content is very much looking at Bitcoin, the movement, and how you can kind of understand Bitcoin through the lens by which you view the world. And so, I'd say that really helps. the exact like sort of what is Bitcoin, what is a blockchain, what is Bitcoin mining. We try and direct people. There's so many great resources that can explain that question or those questions very well, including, resources we built out ourselves at Bitcoin Magazine. So we try to encourage people leading up to really learn about Bitcoin and get familiar with it before they get on site. Otherwise, ask someone around or go to some of the entry level obvious content that we have that explains some of that. But, probably next year, we're going to have to do a little bit more one-on-one content because we're going to be in a mass market environment for Bitcoin. We're going to be in that phase of the adoption cycle. And so, we'll probably, instead of 50%, maybe it's 70, will be truly people who are there to learn about Bitcoin for the first time. So that's how we view it.
So yeah, that's actually like amazing. I can't wait to see it like next year. Like what you're gonna come up with for Norway's.
Come to Vegas. You got to come to Vegas.
Yeah, because like truly, you've been in crypto for 7 years. I've been in crypto for like 7-8 years now, and then my family sometimes, like when I'm trying to explain to them, my grandpa is like, "Yeah, you are working for Bitcoin," and that's it. And then I'm not working for Bitcoin, obviously. I mean, like you could get away with that because you're working for Bitcoin Magazine and Bitcoining, but like still. So have you tried to, or like, what's your strategy with them? Are you trying to like orange peel them as well?
Yeah, I've worked on my parents. I would say they both understand Bitcoin pretty well now, which is great. The "you're working for Bitcoin" sort of line, though, I generally clap back immediately. And I'm like, look, I'm not working for Bitcoin. Bitcoin is digital gold. No one works for gold, right? You don't say, oh, you work for gold, right? That doesn't make any sense. So, people usually connect it when I kind of throw that out there.
Organizing an event of this volume must like take a village. So like, when do you start to prepare for the next conference? What are the basic steps that you are taking? Do you believe in work-life balance, or like how does it work?
Oh, you sound like my team. So we start working on the next year's event the day after. Really, even before the Nashville event, we were already working on Vegas. So some great examples is, first of all, we had to book the venue, we had to get the dates locked in. We had to stand up our ticketing platform. We talked to some initial speakers already to get them on board. We talked to some of our biggest sponsors to make sure that they were on board. So, we were doing work for Vegas in the run up to Nashville in a pretty big way. And so, but now that Nashville's over, of course, first we tie up all the loose ends. We get all of the booths and the stages and everything broken down. We communicate with all of our attendees. We get surveys. The survey data is like super important to us. We understand like where do we need to double down? Where do we need to improve? What did we do well? What did we do bad? How do we fix that for next year? And yeah, then it becomes a game of like, all right, next year we're in Vegas. It's a new venue. We've never been there before. We got to send our production team. We got to send our experience team over. Let's tour the venue. Let's learn about what we can do with this venue. Like, is it a massive hall? Are there other rooms? What can we build in those rooms? Then we get to like, I think the most fun part of designing the event, which is like the idea phase, where we have kind of no bad ideas. And the real question is like, how are people going to experience Bitcoin this year? Right. And, we try to, cast our finger to the air and figure out what the narratives for next year may be. And so, for Nashville, the truth is I guess it was April of 2023, right after Bitcoin 2023, we were talking about 2024 is an election year. We've got to get the presidential candidates to come speak about Bitcoin. And so, like in some ways we called our shot on that. I don't think any of us appreciated how difficult it might be to actually pull that off. But yeah, like, we knew going into that event that success looked like Bitcoin being on the ballot. And so, for next year, we're already talking about what it could look like. I think that there's going to be a large contingent of, this is a little icky to say, but I think Wall Street is going to show up in a major way at Bitcoin 2025 because of the ETFs, because of the structured products, because of the size of the asset class of Bitcoin. you know, they can't ignore it anymore. And so they're all going to show up in droves is my bet. So figuring out how to truly orange pill Wall Street, I think is going to be a massive undertaking for the event. But also things like, Lightning Network should be continue to be adopted. We tried our hand at a new payments kind of infrastructure for our event. There were things about it that went really well. There were things that, we got to improve for next year. But, we worked with BTC Pay Server, Rockstar Dev, Pavel, all of them to try and build out like a truly native Bitcoin payments experience. If someone wanted to buy food, buy something for our merch store, shop at the bazaar, like we wanted them to have a BTC Pay Server level experience. And to be honest, in some ways, it's better than what you could do with Shopify. So I think doubling down on that and building out our payments infrastructure is going to be a really big one for next year, especially if we have, 30, 40,000 attendees, which I think is very possible. And we every year we have a totem, which is like our key sort of signature idea for that year. At B24, we had this nice dome, a geodesic dome with like all this 3D mapping and a jukebox in the middle where, we had this Bitcoin as a record theme, and you could use Lightning to select a song off the jukebox and, play it, which was super fun. And so like, all these little things that we try and do to make it really authentic and tie in. So we're going to enter into that phase of ideation pretty soon and come up with some really fun ideas. And then the last thing I'll say is, of course, finding the speakers for next year is a really big undertaking. We try to not make it repetitive. We try to go find new names, new ideas, new companies, new people who haven't talked about Bitcoin before or are further along in their journey or have a new idea. Maybe they've talked before, but they have a new idea they want to explore. And I'm really starting to get that nailed down early on is super important too. So that's the how the sausage is made a little bit.
So speaking of speakers, like who was the most memorable for you, like from the past conferences?
Well, certainly, I think that both Trump and RFK did a phenomenal job at B24K. Honestly, I think RFK did a better job than Trump. Trump kind of gave his classic speech. RFK, man, I mean, he gave a very rousing speech, and he ended it with, I'm not the first purple candidate. I'm not the first, purple being like the independent candidate color of elections, right? Republicans are red, Democrats are blue, independents are purple. He was like, I'm the first orange candidate. And like he truly, wanted people to feel like he was the first Bitcoin candidate. And in a lot of ways, he really was. I mean, he truly understood Bitcoin in a fundamental way and wanted it to succeed and wanted to make it into his platform. So that one was probably the most memorable. And he's not going to win the election, it seems. Maybe tomorrow he's planning on dropping out and endorsing Trump from what, the rumor mill is saying right now. I don't know. But what I will say is I think he has done more to fundamentally change the way that Bitcoin is talked about in the political realm than anyone. And, we're honored to have played a part in that. But, I think that he's probably who really stood out the most to me in this past year.
In general, here in Hungary, we had the chance to kind of sit down at the table and then influence the regulations. Did you have the chance to kind of have a say in the regulations previously, or were they asking you like, okay, guys, you are like organizing the biggest conference, maybe you have something to say about the regulations or like how we should move forward in this?
That will kind of remain to be seen as time goes on, what hand, if any, we get to have in the regulations. I will say that, we've at least been able to have Trump's ear on some ideas that we had. A big one that I think we were able to suggest to him that he jumped on and did a great job with was free Ross. So, we were talking to him pretty early this past year about Ross Ulbricht, the creator of the Silk Road. He's in jail for, 2 life sentences for nonviolent crimes, first-time offender. And if you never looked at the story of Ross, I mean, it's one of the greatest. I think he's the first political prisoner of Bitcoin in a lot of ways. And so he came out at the Libertarian conference after we talked about it with him and announced that he would free Ross. It got, rousing applause. He then said it again at the Bitcoin conference that he would free Ross. And so, I do think that we've been successful in kind of putting that as part of the platform, which has been awesome. And, there are other things we want to see, and, maybe we'll be successful at getting those to happen, and maybe we won't. But at the minimum, just having an administration that likes our industry is going to be 10 times better than what we've been dealing with for the past 4 years. So that's what I'm excited about.
Yeah, that's for sure. But like ideally, how do you envision like a great regulation in the US? Because right now it's how many percentage of tax do you need to pay after your gains? I'm not even sure. Like
it's very complicated. It depends on whether it's short term or long term. But I can tell you that the Harris campaign just announced like 2 days ago that they support a 44.5% long-term capital gains tax. So that would be pretty high, pretty crazy. And then they're also looking at supporting a unrealized gains tax. So this would be for the ultra wealthy of the United States, but basically taking, someone put together kind of a thread about like, how does this apply to Elon Musk, right? Elon Musk has roughly $50 billion in unrealized gains on his Tesla stock. And so based on like the percentage, he would be forced to sell $10 billion of Tesla stock next year in an unrealized gains tax if it were passed. So, definitely that's not an ideal situation for Bitcoin adoption in the United States. We would like to see that not happen. I think with Trump, he's kind of known for trying to reduce a lot of taxes on people. So that would be something we'd want to continue to see. And we've kind of publicly said some ideas that we have around, for instance, removing capital gains tax altogether on de minimis uses of Bitcoin, de minimis purchases. So, if you go buy coffee with Bitcoin, there should be no capital gains tax on that. You shouldn't have to worry about what the cost basis of that Bitcoin was before you purchase the coffee and then pay, 3 cents because the price went up, right? Like that's not something that people should have to worry about. So, removing that capital gains tax, I think is a very beneficial thing. Supporting the mining industry, deregulating the use of electricity is going to be a big one. And that's going to apply far outside of mining, but mining is going to be, I think, the champion of that. You should not be able to regulate as a country where electrons go, what's an allowed path of an electron and what isn't an allowed path of an electron. And right now with Bitcoin mining, the current administration is trying to regulate and tax what the use of electricity is for and, discourage certain uses of electricity. And that just seems wrong. Electricity is electricity. You pay a price for it. If the market says that was worth the price you paid, then you pay it, and that's that. And so, I think that's going to be a big one to support the mining industry. Enshrining self-custody is a big one. There's in some ways it's symbolic, but the symbolism is important, I think. We don't want to be a country that would ever force confiscation of Bitcoin or not allow you to hold it in your own personal wallet and force you to stick it on some custodial platform like an ETF. Like we don't want that, right? So those kinds of things are all things we're looking for sure. And I think a lot of them are going to be easy to do and easy to pass once you have like a pro Bitcoin president. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and at the moment, I think in general, like surveillance and KYC is also a big issue. Definitely, like with the centralized exchanges like Coinbase and Kraken, that you cannot open an account or anything without like doing your KYC. And then afterwards, like Bitcoin is pseudonym, so like if someone like figures out your address and then you're sending it out to a different wallet, then it could like pose an issue, because I heard that they want to remove the mixers altogether. Or there was some kind of regulation that was like about to pass. Have you heard about that?
Yeah, no, they outlawed and attacked Samurai Wallet, which was a mixer. It was a privacy tool for Bitcoin users because you can track on-chain usage really well. And you can tell, when someone sends all their Bitcoin from one wallet to another wallet, then that's probably their wallet. And then when they send it to someone else, you can go talk to them and say, hey, who'd you send this to? And then now you know this person's wallet, and you start de-anonymizing the chain. And that's really bad. You want financial privacy. Like you need financial privacy to make true free decisions. So yeah, it's very important and something that, the Trump team has heard us out on that and is open to what we're saying. So, I don't know what that's ultimately going to look like. But hopefully, we can allow those mixers to come back into the United States, because it's very important. Similarly, something that you mentioned, but I'm pretty passionate about as well, these exchanges taking KYC information in the first place, I think is super dangerous, because now these exchanges are holding your bank account information, your identity, your social security number, your address, your physical address. And if they get hacked, then every single person, their physical address and how much Bitcoin they potentially own and what wallets they're in is all traceable. And it's this massive honeypot where all of the wealthiest Bitcoin users around the world could get doxxed all at once. And then their physical privacy is no longer safe. People who may want to go after them and steal their Bitcoins, or $5 monkey wrench, $5 wrench attack their holdings, those people are all vulnerable now. So we should not be encouraging the collection of that kind of data and tying it to people's financial information. That's just wrong. And I know that the exchanges don't want to do that. They don't want to have that information. They don't want to be liable to hold that information. They don't want to be targets for all these hackers. That's not something they want to do, but they're required to based on current regulations. And so, yeah, that's something that it would be great to change, because KYC is truly dangerous for Bitcoin users.
Do you think that zero knowledge identification could solve this issue in some way?
From a technical standpoint, it could, but from a regulatory standpoint, it doesn't matter if the regulations don't change. If Coinbase is still going to have stored somewhere who you are and how much Bitcoin you purchased, it doesn't matter if you can't track the wallets on chain anymore. People can still figure that out if they hack Coinbase and get that information. So, it's still, I think, there needs to be improvements from the regulatory side before you can truly see improvements from like a zero knowledge proof side. And the unfortunate part with Bitcoin is that you'll ultimately need a hard fork, and maybe even a hard fork won't be able to insert true, ZK, Zcash kind of privacy on chain. Like, you'll probably need to use another chain to get that level of privacy. So, that's unfortunate. Maybe if you have something like drive chains, Paul Stork has BIP 300, which is to encourage the use of drive chains, make it really easy for people to use their Bitcoin in a trustless way on a different chain. And so you could then spin up a zero knowledge proof, chain similar to Zcash, and trustlessly transact your Bitcoin over to that chain, and then, transact in private. But until, something like that is implemented, then, there's really no hope of that happening on Bitcoin anytime soon.
So your work focuses mainly on Bitcoin, but are you personally following any other coins or any other projects that you're interested in?
I would say I'm 99.9% focused on Bitcoin. The one thing that I try and do is I try to not be ignorant of what's happening elsewhere, especially because I generally take the idea that anything that's valuable that's being created somewhere else can ultimately be recreated on Bitcoin. You've seen that with the past year with ordinals and Bitcoin native assets spinning up. That's a huge trend that I expect to continue to disrupt other chains like Ethereum. I don't know why Ethereum is used anymore, because now you can do everything on Bitcoin, and then you have Solana that's way faster and way cheaper to use. And so, between those two, I don't know what Ethereum's narrative is anymore. So, those kinds of things, if you weren't paying attention, then, you may miss that. And certainly it's important to pay attention to those things. But in terms of my investing in and otherwise kind of participating in those ecosystems, I tend not to. I tend to just focus on Bitcoin.
Okay. So you're not really into these new data storage and other solutions like the DeepIn, supposed to be the next big thing.
Yeah, I've seen them, but not paying too much attention to them yet. The one that I will say that I've been paying attention to that I think is super interesting is Polymarket. I really want Polymarket to be rebuilt on Bitcoin. I think, it was one of the core tenets of Bitcoin early on was decentralized prediction markets were going to be able to be created using Bitcoin. And decentralized prediction markets are another form of, futures markets in some ways. It's a risk hedging mechanism for a lot of people, and it helps create more sophisticated financial markets in general. And of course, right now, Polymarket is being used mostly to bet on the U.S. election. And that's entertaining and that's interesting too. And there's interesting data to be had there. But it's super easy to turn around and go create a prediction market based on, is the price of soybeans going to go below $2 before August 31st? And if I'm a soybean producer and I need to lock in my cost basis of $2 in order to be profitable this month, I can go hedge that out in the futures, in the prediction market. And now I've got like a permissionless, decentralized way of ensuring that, my farm continues to produce at a level that's, adequate for what I need. So yeah, like that sort of infrastructure, I want to see that built out on Bitcoin, that uses, I forget which rollup, is it Optimism? It's one of the ETH rollups that it is on right now. Actually, I think it launched on Binance Launchpad a few years ago. I keep wanting to say Metis. It's not Metis, it's Matic. Matic is they rebranded to something else. But anyway, it's on that chain. It's on that rollup. I don't know why I can't think of it right now. But yeah, like I want to see that built on Bitcoin. I want to see a way by which I can use my Bitcoin to participate in that market without having to send it to a centralized third party or trusted custodian. So there's still plenty of stuff to be built on Bitcoin that is being built in other crypto places. And so for that reason, I want to keep paying attention.
As we are like approaching to the end of our interview, for someone who is like starting out in the crypto or Bitcoin space, or like blockchain space, however we want to call it, do you have like one piece of advice which you wish you had when you began your whole journey?
I would say the biggest advice I can give my 2017 self is truly just be patient. And, everyone, what's the old saying? Like everyone overestimates what will happen in 5 years and underestimates what will happen in 10 years. I think that in 2017, I would expect by 2022 that we were at 100K Bitcoin prices and, everyone was going to be using Bitcoin already. And that didn't happen. But it's still not 2027. It still hasn't been 10 years. And already we have presidential candidates talking about it in their main platform. And so, would I have expected that? Would I have expected, a US president to be talking about Bitcoin in his campaign? No, I wouldn't have. So it's crazy what can end up happening. And for some of the bolder, more exciting, more tangible adoption metrics of Bitcoin, like I think we just got to be patient. And we got to let hyper Bitcoinization play out. And anyone who pretends to know exactly how it's going to play out is lying. We're all along for the ride a little bit, and it's a fun ride.
Let's see what's going to happen in the next 3 years.
Could get crazy.
Yeah, it already is. So, where can we reach you if we want to follow you?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter at BrandBTC. Otherwise, I don't tweet that often, but I'm on there probably more than I want to admit. Otherwise, follow Bitcoin Magazine and follow the Bitcoin Conference on Twitter. We're always out there kind of spreading the word about what we're building and what's going on in Bitcoin. And I like to think that we do a pretty good job at it. So certainly give us a follow there.
Thank you so much, Brandon, and also for the work that you do, because I truly believe that you making this conference is really like one of the gateways to mass adoption and hyper Bitcoinization. So I really appreciate that you took the time today and come to the podcast. And hopefully I'm going to see you in Vegas next year.
Absolutely. And come to Amsterdam too. We'll just take you around the world. It'll be fun. But Barbara, thank you so much. It's been great talking to you, and I appreciate you letting me ramble a little bit.
Ez volt a Bitcoin Kebab, a Bitcoin Bázis podcastja.